Taco Bell presents this edition of Big Ten today. Thrilled to have you with us from our studios. Would you grab my hand there?
I was trying to, and then you moved it away.
Is that a new move for you? Like, we'll just open the show with a friendly hand grab.
It's not awkward at all.
Nope.
Yes.
Boy, that was a real smooth start to this show. I think we're off to a great new year, aren't you?
I cannot wait to do this.
Mike Colin, Anthony Herron here. Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports is joining us throughout the show. By the way, you weren't here last week with Ross, but he said something in the show, and I wrote it down because I couldn't believe it. He said, and I quote, "Georgia Tech will pull a top 10 upset on a field goal as time expires, mark my words." Can you believe that?
That's the type of content you get from Ross Dellinger.
I wish I could say that I said that, but last night I did pick Georgia Tech to cover. They did do that. Didn't expect a win. Man, that was crazy.
I'm just saying, check the tape. All right, let's get to our big story as we begin this show here on the Big Ten Network, and it is key debuts. Thursday, 3 Big Ten teams kick off their season, and hence the conferences. Illinois, Minnesota, and Rutgers. Friday, Wisconsin and the Spartans play. Everyone else is in action over Saturday and Sunday. And while the West Coast 4 are the huge new debuts this weekend, that's the macro side. What about the micro side? The players who are making debuts, because there are tons of key names about to have their first starts as Big Ten players. Who are the guys that you're most excited to see make a debut? Ross, we'll start with you.
Well, I'm most excited to see a guy that we actually haven't seen in FBS football, right, which is Max Brosmer. Minnesota quarterback, was previously in the FCS level at New Hampshire. In fact, he won what they describe as the FCS Heisman Trophy, the Walter Payton Award. He put up 8,000 yards passing, 36 starts, 68 touchdowns. He makes his not just his Minnesota debut, but his FBS debut, and he'll do it against North Carolina, Mac Brown in the Tar Heels. And we all know North Carolina struggles defensively the last few years. They have not consistently done well enough on defense to get to that next level. So maybe Brosmer, while we know he'll be up against bigger, faster, stronger guys, right, on the FBS level, maybe he'll take advantage of a Tar Heels defense that we have seen struggle a bit.
And Ross, when I saw Max Brosmer in Indianapolis a few weeks ago at Football Media Days, I didn't know what to expect. I hadn't met him in person before, but he's taller. He's got like a more physical stature to him than I anticipated, and he struck me as a really confident individual. He chose Minnesota, had multiple options because of the success that he'd had at the FCS level, chose the Gophers, and he was truly one of the few quarterbacks that actually represented his program there in Indianapolis at Big Ten Football Media Days. So being a guy who's transferred into this program, it shows the confidence that P.J. Fleck has already instilled in him, and I think that confidence was exuded by Max Brosmer as well. And he is surrounded by not only some playmakers at wide receiver and running back, but an approach, Mike, that I think will really suit his ability to transition into high-level play.
And he's coming in, although it's brand new to him, not just the team, but as Ross said, the level of football. The program is established there at Minnesota. We know what it is with P.J. Fleck now entering his 8th year. If you go to East Lansing, there's a quarterback debuting who's in a very different position. Very different position for Aidan Childs in Michigan State, but he's got the same head coach, the same offensive coordinator that he worked with in Corvallis. So that'll aid the transition for the Spartans QB. And I've been doing what I can. I got to admit, I haven't been tempering the excitement, the expectation that I have for Aidan Childs as effectively as I probably should be, because I do think the sky's the limit for him, not only as an individual talent, but for what he can mean to Michigan State football. He's charismatic. He's got this 1,000-watt smile, and he is the type of player who not only the physical talent ends up showing up, but the way the team can rally around his personality and having some continuity with his head coach, with Brian Lindgren, the offensive coordinator that comes over from Oregon State as well, that's aided the transition that Aidan Childs can make, not only just in the comfort that he possesses within the offensive approach, but in the way his team will respond to him, Ross. So I'm eager to see what that means. I'm a little bit pensive about the playmakers he'll have access to throw to on the outside in East Lansing, but this is another offensive approach where Jonathan Smith likes to run the football, so that's an approach that I think will take some pressure off of Childs as a QB.
Absolutely. And, he's in a position that many of these first-year transfers who are starting at quarterback, which there are a lot of them, by the way, 30 30 transfers will start at quarterback just nationally who are in their first year at their new school. It's pretty wild. But his is a different position, right? Because he was with Jonathan Smith. He was in the system previously. So you would think he's ahead of all the other 29 who are in their first year at their new school and going to be starting at quarterback.
I remember talking to Childs before the season, in the offseason, and he was talking about his devotion to the head coach. And he said basically, wherever you're going, I'm going, coach. And I said, well, how true is that? What did you know about Michigan State before you transferred? His response was, Draymond? That was it. I mean, he basically
Draymond is noteworthy.
Very noteworthy player,
right.
but that was the extent of what he knew about East Lansing. Ross, there's another quarterback. I mean, there's a handful of quarterbacks making debuts, but I know there's one more in particular that you got your eye on.
Yeah, Miller Moss at USC, right? I don't know. There's a bigger stage than the one he has to open the season in Las Vegas, unopposed on television on a Sunday night, and against an SEC team. And many would probably say that Moss's debut was last year in the Holiday Bowl, right, where he set a record, 6 touchdowns. It was a Holiday Bowl record in his replacing Caleb Williams there. But to me, this is the real debut, right? This is the real stage. Vegas against LSU. We get to see him in kind of a new look 2024 kind of USC offense. He's been waiting his time. You know, we just mentioned about transfer quarterbacks in the Power 5 level. There's 30, as I mentioned, 30 first-year starting quarterbacks who are transfers. He's not one of them, right? He's not in that group. He's been waiting at USC for 3 years to get his chance, and finally he'll get it. Not only does he get it, he gets it on the stage of Las Vegas and LSU, a big SEC opponent, and against an LSU defense, right, that we've seen last year have a lot of struggles. So maybe he can take advantage of that. He's certainly got a plethora. Anthony, I think, mentioned the fact that Aiden Childs doesn't have the type of wide receiver threats you would want. Miller Moss doesn't have that problem.
Right, with Zachariah Branch and a number of other young playmakers who haven't even gotten as much tick yet for USC. My mind does go back to a time where Clay Helton was still the head coach. It was early in his time with USC, and Max Brown was kind of making a big debut against Alabama, an SEC foe, in a neutral site game. And there was like an early play that was made by the Trojans, and then Alabama just sort of steamrolled USC from there. It's one of those memories Trojan fans won't love, but this is an opportunity early in the season in a neutral site, in a kickoff game, to step onto a national stage in a prime time window and showcase what this season, what year 3 for Lincoln Riley, what the program can be now that he's been able to sort of put his roster in place. And I love the opportunity that's here for Miller Moss, because a lot of folks, because he backed up Caleb Williams, sort of viewed Miller Moss as this guy who maybe didn't have a lot of his own physical attributes. Was he just some sort of walk-on guy? Are they going to go into the transfer portal and bring someone else in to potentially do big things? And yes, they've added some portal talent at quarterback and other spots. But Miller Moss is an extremely gifted quarterback in his own right. Stylistically, he'll be different than Caleb Williams, as most other humans are. But I expect him to put up big numbers, and I expect this stage to be one that USC is prepared for.
I like that you brought up Zachariah Branch, too, because that is a great weapon for him, a great comfort for him. I think he's going to be the guy who takes the biggest leap forward this season in terms of notoriety. Yeah. I don't know how many people nationally know who he is. I think by December, a ton of people will know who he is, because he's just overflowing with talent. And speaking of guys who can catch the ball, there are always big recruits who come in to the league, but it's kind of rare you have the #1 overall recruit, regardless of position, coming into the Big Ten. But that's happening this year.
And to have a player like that at this position for Ohio State, where we know what the Buckeyes have been doing at receiver of recent vintage, just season after season, 5-star here, 4-star there, first-round pick year after year, #1 player in the country at times, doesn't even really crack the lineup because they've been so deep and talented at wide receiver. And by some people's estimation, Jeremiah Smith is the player who really sets himself apart from this extremely gifted crew of receivers we've seen in Columbus, really for generations, but especially since Ryan Day has been there as a head coach. And Jeremiah Smith not only brings the physical presence to the table, but also the competitive temperament that you hope for, because when he's on the field, he's not looking to step out there and talk a bunch of smack, but when the opponent does, he responds at a high level. He certainly goes into a receiver room that's got other talent around him as well. So if Emeka Egbuka is going to be the alpha of that receiver core, you can count on Jeremiah Smith to be the omega. He will finish every time he gets the opportunity for that contested grab. And yes, it will be an approach on offense where I think the quantity of opportunities that Jeremiah Smith gets as a pass catcher, the volume targets may not be there in his freshman season, but trust me, the quality will be there for this young man in Columbus. I cannot wait to see him take the field for the Buckeyes, Ross.
Yeah, I mean, this is an incredibly exciting player. Any player named Player of the Year in the state of Florida for his high school production must be pretty dang good. I was looking at just prepping for the show, looking at some of his statistics in high school are just insane, right? His last year, 88 catches, almost 1,400 yards, 19 touchdowns. His last game of his high school career, they won the state championship 56-0. Ohio State went down to Miami and got him out of the Hurricanes' backyard. Just an impressive kid with obviously an incredible amount of talent. And we've talked about this Ohio State team, and we're about to talk more in my pick because I have an Ohio State player on the opposite side, but they are just bursting with talent, even at the true freshman level.
You were alluding to your next guy, and that's on the defensive side, Caleb Downs, the transfer from Alabama.
Yeah, look, I know, they kick off the season against Akron, and the game probably may be over at halftime, but still excited to see some of these talented guys like Caleb Downs, former Alabama player. In fact, I think he became the first true freshman at Alabama to lead that program in tackles ever. So that in the storied history of that program, that's pretty incredible. I think most would say that Downs was the most valuable player in the portal this past year, and Ohio State probably got 3 of the top 5 portal players this past year, and he was certainly one of them. I don't know how exactly that he'll fit into Jim Knowles' defense, but I think he could fit into any defense at the talent that he has. And also, he suggested Anthony during camp, I believe that maybe he'll get a little spot or two in the offensive backfield at running back.
And as deep as Ohio State already is at running back, the electricity, if you've watched the high school highlights of Caleb Downs with the football in his hands, there should be a lot of excitement for what he can do on that side of the football also. But to add him into Jim Knowles' defense, where so much of the secondary returns intact, Mike, and then you also have that pass rush, what they've already added up front and what they returned from the previous season as well, the defense was already deep and talented. The defense was already going to be one of the best in America. And every Buckeye beat writer that I've had a chance to ask about this in recent weeks, who's the best player on that exceptional Ohio State defense in Jim Knowles' 3rd season running it? All of them have said Caleb Downs.
Wow.
That is mind-boggling to me when you think about the talent up front in the NFL, the talent at linebacker going to the National Football League, the secondary players on their way to the league as well. Caleb Downs has got at least 2 years of college football left to play, and they're saying he's already the best of that bunch.
Sawyer, JT, I mean, right. The amount of talented guys there.
Yep, Denzel Burke, you name it.
It's when you're the leading tackler on Alabama as a freshman, that's a sign of the talent you have. One more for you, and it's a little bit of a twist on the idea of a new debut for a Big Ten player.
I try to follow rules, but you know me. You've been around how I operate, so I did put my own little twist on things here with a debut that's going to happen, but it's a known commodity in the Big Ten because Abdul Carter has been wrecking shop in backfields and sideline to sideline all over the college football scene for the last 2 years, but now there will be a bit of a position change. We'll see him go from being a full-time off-ball linebacker to now spending more of his time along the defensive front, some of his time even with his hand in the dirt as an edge rusher. And what's really set him apart as an off-ball linebacker wearing the sticks is because he's been a part of that Manny Diaz blitz package. But he's not just one of these guys who times up the snap at a high level and can get into the backfield because he hits that crease before the offensive line really knows what hit him. He has exceptional pass rush maneuvers when he gets there as well. So whether it's been an offensive lineman, a running back, a tight end at times, we've seen Abdul Carter use great pass rush levers, violence of his hands, counter moves, and everything else. So add him to the defensive front because they're already so deep At linebacker, Penn State linebacker, you getting better and better at the second level. So to get Abdul Carter as a defensive end, with that stature at 6'3", with that force he can bring at 250 plus, and all the toolbox of pass rush moves I was just talking about, Ross, that guy, as much as he has wreaked havoc in the opposing backfield up to this point in his career, now Tom Allen has a movable chess piece. It's going to be so fun to watch.
Yeah, that's scary to move him. I know he packed on a few pounds to get down there on the line, but it's scary to think about how good he was in as far as just how much agility. You talk about some of these moves that he showed as a linebacker, and when he gets down there, what he's going to be is a force, I'm sure. And hey, he could always back up, right, and play that linebacker role if they need him to in the middle of a game, transitions, things like that. Depends on the downs. He's a versatile player, obviously.
He might be the most exciting defensive player in the Big Ten. I mean, he is a joy to watch. Or Downs. Might be either the last two guys.
We got options.
There's a few guys for sure. Options on this topic, by the way. Could have talked Nebraska's new QB, Dylan Raiola. He's going to be a huge storyline week 1 for sure. I think Will Rogers is incredibly quiet. The new Washington QB. He's completed more passes than anyone in the history of the SEC. And now he's in the Big Ten as he transfers from Mississippi State. There's a lot of debuts still to talk about throughout this week. By the way, you want to end this segment the way we started it? Nope.